copywritten production of the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated and is intended for the sole purpose of informing our Recreation Center members. Any duplication, copying, transmission, broadcast, or use, including electronic and social media, is strictly prohibited without the prior written consent from the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated. Thank you for watching.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is our fourth meeting of the Strategic Alternative Committee. Gene is our communications chief coordinator.
That's what you said.
Coordinator. Chief coordinator, whatever. So you have a couple things to cover.
I do.
Thank you.
Actually, we got 5 seconds.
And she's not very precise.
Please put your phones on quiet. And we'll try to remember. Now I got to turn mine off here. Speaking of. So welcome. Rules. On the very first meeting, I believe you handed out some rules. That I've now lost. And
First rule is don't lose the rules.
first rule is don't lose your papers. I got it.
Okay.
Mutual respect in all matters. Otherwise, John will play his harmonica. The meeting time is at 2 o'clock, and we will start on time. Meeting length is not to exceed 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
No miscommunication here. Check, please.
Bye. 2 hours. Please raise your hand to be recognized if you have something to say. Now, I disagree with this one, but you put it on the list, so I'm going to say it, and you all, side conversations to be allowed, so long as not disruptive. If it becomes disruptive, John's going to play his harmonica. The acoustics in this room are better now that there's more people in it. But if we have side conversations, it is kind of hard to hear. So if you do start one, try to think this. The meeting will start with a short review of the last meeting, and then continuation of where we left off, and transparency and sharing the information obtained with all. There are no secrets in the SAC lab. So with that, the other thing I have on here is the rules. Always sign in. I think you all have.
It's coming. It's coming.
It's coming.
It's right here.
It's coming. Use your placards, which you guys write on, spot on, and the cell phones are on silent.
Okay, great.
Okay?
All right. So we have about another minute left in our 2-minute meeting. Is there any discussion?
I need a fob.
You need a fob.
She needs a name tag. And
Why don't you see me after and let me know if there's any corrections to the committee list that I sent out, emails, phone numbers, if you need a fob, if you need a placard, that's what
Wes,
I'm
could
here
you
for.
call Scott? He's waiting on a call.
Here, on here?
Yes. Oh, see, Jeff was going to. I need that message after 5. Okay. So, who wants to recap real briefly last meeting? Okay, don't everybody jump up at once. Jeff?
Well, there were 3 points, so we had a document up there. One, we talked about how we're organizing our meetings going forward. This is, and we're past the startup phase, we're into the data analysis phase, which is what we're going to be talking about here today. We also then spent a considerable amount of time reviewing the Mountain View. Karen did that presentation where we talked about what the problems were with that and why the board voted to put it on pause and why this committee was formed. And that was, quite frankly, the meat of the presentation.
Wait, say that one
last
again. I'm
week.
sorry, Jeff, I don't hear what you said.
Okay, let's get this done first and then I'll talk. Is he on or?
No, I only did with Fox.
Okay, we're gonna not do that for a minute.
Okay.
That's just, the last part of it was the presentation that Karen made, which we talked about the Mountain View Option 2 and all the shortcomings and problems and issues that were identified after that plan was adopted. So that was very important to get that as a baseline because as we come up with alternatives, we don't want to make the same mistakes again. We need to overcome the same problems. So that one was worthwhile, maybe even next week, putting those issues back up just briefly again because they were so important for us to understand as a group. But those were the 3 things that we talked about last week.
Could we get a printout of those issues that Karen had up with the
Yeah.
17 or whatever they were?
Yeah.
14.
Yeah.
Karen, is there anything I need to add to that? Or?
I don't think so. It was a little bit, how did we get to option 2? That was,
Yeah,
so it
and
was
you went through the
there
timeline.
were actually three different options that were, first there was just a plain option, and then there was an option 1B, and there was an option 2. And option 2 is the one that was on the table until the board
Correct.
suspended that in March.
So,
So I guess when we say that option 2, so that everyone understands it, we're benchmarking everything we do in here against option 2. Is it better? Is it cheaper? Is it quicker? Does it provide more benefits? Yes.
so that was my question. I'm sorry I missed last meeting. I was ill. Why are we, it seems to me that the major issue occurred when option 2 got thrown, option 1B was thrown out and option 2 occurred and all those things happened. Why are we benchmarking off of option 2 instead of going back to option 1 and using that as our benchmark moving forward?
Gene?
Because the charter, the
Sure.
motion is what dictates what you're doing. And that's,
And the motion specifically says that we have to work off of option 2 instead of strategic alternatives to Mountain View?
Well, so I guess
That's
one
my
way
question.
to address that is that what the board approved was option 2. What the motion said was we're suspending option 2 and we're going to benchmark off that. Now, to answer your question, one of the proposals you may make is option 1. So that could be a proposal for as an alternative. Does that make sense?
I don't think that it means that we're saying that we think this is the next best option, and we're just gonna try to improve on it.
please.
Yeah, I don't think that we're saying when we say, I mean, what do you mean when you say you're benchmarking it at option 2? That doesn't mean that we think that option 2 is the next best option and we're just gonna tweak it and fix it to make it better. That's not what we're saying. We're simply saying that that's where we are. The suspension is not an elimination, it's a suspension. So the plan is still there, it's just currently suspended. So as we're moving forward, it's always in relationship to where we happen to be. And as John said, it may be that we'll say option 1 was better than option 2 was. We might like to go back and revisit that, or we might come up with something entirely different. It doesn't mean that we're tied to what is in option 2 in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, thank you.
Clarify.
So today's meeting, we had 2 speakers, and I would suggest that we have a lot of dialogue. It's going to be on utilization statistics that have been gathered both by the long-range planning committee prior to 2022 and by RCSC management in 2022 and continuing on in 2023. So you will see how the facilities are used, what they're used for, what percentage of available time they're used, so on and so forth. The idea being we want to give you the same data that the board looks at so that when you're thinking of alternatives, you're looking at the same data that everyone else looks at. We all have the same understanding of the data. With us today is Gary Ozier. Gary, raise your right hand. Gary's going to walk us through a presentation he gave to the board on capacity utilization 2 years ago?
2022, 4 of 2022.
4 of 2022. Okay. Gary, the floor is yours.
Wait, now I'll turn the lights off.
Yeah. Gene, you want?
Thank you.
Too much?
A little easier to
that's
see.
good. We'll
It's
get
easier to see, that's the new.
Turn them all on. There we go.
The whole room, 'cause it's split. the way it is.
This is a presentation that we made to the board in April of 2022. It came about because we were trying to come up with some parameters to evaluate the PIF fund on, okay, PIF fund projects. And what we found out is we don't have any information. So we started with this. This is a first run at what we thought might be needed to give us some idea of what the heck's going on, okay? So you won't see every activity in this because all we're doing is trying to create a format and a formula. Yes?
I just want to know, do you want questions while you present them, or save them?
I don't care.
Okay,
Doesn't bother me. Ask away.
thank you.
I have a question. When
Okay.
you say "we," your background, your company,
The long range.
previous committee,
I'm sorry, it was the Long Range Planning Committee.
package this and you presented on their behalf.
No, I actually did not present this. Dale Lair presented this. But I helped formulate it, and I'm the only one left that had anything to do with it. So John said, will you do this? Yeah, I can do that.
Gary, I think it was 2021, wasn't it?
I heard somebody say something.
Yeah, it was 2021.
2021.
It wasn't last year. It was
Wasn't?
before that. no.
All right. Time flies when you're having fun.
Okay.
So, what we tried to do was develop a system, okay? And there's the reasoning behind why we did it, okay? I won't go over every one unless you have a question.
So these are, it's a process that any alternative would go through? Or this is the reason why you would want to go through the process?
This process was designed to give the board and the Long Range Planning Committee some direction towards where we should spend our PIF money.
Okay.
Because we were trying to do long range planning, and here we are, we know nothing about what's going on right now. So what we did was try and come up with
It's a method.
a method
It's a method.
to attack it, okay? And this is what we came up with. So what we thought we needed was, what's the capacity? That's pretty straightforward most of the time. However, we had to go to the bowling people, we had to go to the golf people, we had to go to a lot of different people to get what would be the capacity. And when I say that, that's the max, okay? You got them standing there just like this, right beside each other, okay? What's the maximum you can cram in to do that activity? Then we looked at utilization. This was the toughest because sometimes we had good data, other times we had no data. Then there was some data, and you had to speculate a little bit. But I think that particular thing is getting ironed out as we speak, hopefully, and that we'll have good data on down the line. The trend analysis was pretty straightforward. I just went back, well, for instance, golf, I went back 20 years, wasn't it?
I think it was,
And, because they had data on the numbers of rounds and all that good stuff, so you could look at bowling, several different things where they had been keeping data for quite a long time. So the trend analysis was, what's the activity doing at this point in time? Is it headed upward or downward? And if so, how much? So that's what that was.
Excuse me, so is that a trend within Sun City or trend nationwide or trend right here, Sun City?
Right there.
All right, I'll look at that.
Okay? There's nothing outside here. I shouldn't say that. I did look at lawn bowling outside of Sun City. I tried to look at it worldwide because I couldn't get much information on it. So I found a couple of sites dealing with it in like Australia, which is pretty high. They have a lot of lawn bowling. And they were closing clubs. So I didn't give a number for it. I just said that it looks like it's decreasing. Yes.
Seems like this was in the middle of COVID.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Seems like this was in the middle of COVID, correct?
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how would that
No.
impact these numbers?
No, the data, the statement clearly
The
says.
data is
look at
before COVID,
2015 to 2019 in order to
Okay, that
eliminate
was
the.
good.
because we wanted to have a true
So it says right there.
value that had no interference other than the summer. Okay. See,
minimize the effects of COVID.
minimize the effect of summer heat and out migration. We wanted to be consistent. The test period was 2015 to 2019. And we eliminated May, June, July, and August. We didn't care what that data said. Pretty much. And then the weekly center hours is when they're open. So that was pretty easy. There's the things we attempted to use to come up with our data. Daily hours, we calculated that.
You're here.
And then number of lanes, courts, whatever, rings. We were able to physically count that. Total count, or rink hours, okay. Hours per game or activity. We tried to contact the clubs or players or whatever, okay? We tried to get information on, for instance, how long is a pickleball game? You know, how many people participate for how long, okay? The average, not wholesale, but the average. And we were able to get a lot of information from people, which was good, because that helps. Net game hours per day, that included the time that everything was open, okay, so that everything was treated consistently. You don't want to say, oh, well, these things only occur from 8 to 9, and these things occur from 10 to 12. We tried to come up with the hours per day that it could occur, okay. Maximum number of players per game, total players per day multiplied out, and then total players per month, and then total players during the test period, that 15 to 19. The trend analysis is a rolling average of data within the test period. Like it says, some areas also show trending over a longer period of time. We had data for golf and bowling and several things that was a longer thing, and we stated that. You'll see here in a little bit.
Can I skip this?
Say what?
You want to skip this slide?
Yeah, that's
And
just.
then they calculated it.
Thank you for the
We
sound.
counted. Here's the ones that we could easily get some information from. Okay? And that's, we didn't want to do everything because you're just testing this out to see if it's going to work.
I have
Go
a
ahead.
question. Where do the players fit in that? Because that all is athletic-oriented activity.
Again, we did not take every activity, okay? We only took the stuff that we could get figures for,
Right, that's right.
okay?
We have ticket sales, if that's a help to you.
I'm sure that John will love that. If he's gonna use these metrics to evaluate the players, that's exactly the way it should go.
I brought them today and Jeff hasn't.
Okay, I'm just saying that,
Thanks.
we didn't
have-
capture everything because we didn't have information. There's no use throwing it out there just for the heck of it. And we wanted to see if it was gonna work. That was the big thing. Okay. Here's the trend on billiards from 2007 to 2019. Then this is the trend for the test period. Okay? So you can see quite a bit of difference, which, you know, you wouldn't know that unless you took a look at the numbers. Now, these represent the utilization. Okay? Based on the numbers, the 3 places that we have billiards, there's nobody, 5% utilization is the top money. So, given that it's going up, you want to pay attention to that, okay? Because it may, with new numbers for the next period, that may show something else. That's what we don't know. But that gives you the idea how this works. Okay.
Gary, how can you have an average that's lower than each of the 3 entries? So you have that up there again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
not, obviously they're all very low, but you had each of those places at 5%, 3%, 4% billiards combined. How can you end up with a combined average that's lower than?
I'll be
any of
honest
those
with you, I
other-
have no idea. I'm not going to tell you that I know. Now, if I go back and look at the spreadsheets, I can probably tell what's going on.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. You
I
said,
would just ignore that one.
so you had mentioned in the beginning that you looked in other.
I'm sorry, I'm deaf, I can't hear you.
Okay, you mentioned in the beginning that you looked across the board at other areas for your trending numbers. So when I see the trending numbers, is that 65% a trend up for Sun City or across the country?
Here.
What's that arrow?
This is all Sun City data.
Here.
All right.
Here.
Okay.
What's the 65 is the question?
Increase.
5 years.
Let's see.
From 2015 to 2019.
It's a 5-year period.
It was up
15 to 19,
65%. But
here in Sun City.
the larger trend from 2007 to 2019 is down 18%. So you had a long down, but in the last 4 or 5 years, an increase. So you get that, so you've got the overall, it has been decreasing over a long period of time, but the short period of time is a slight.
That's why when we had data for a longer period of time, that's why we included it out here so you could see both. It just seemed weird to me. It was down 19 over that period of time, but the last 5 years it's been up.
But,
So, you know, no matter what you,
but with statistics, I mean, looking at percentage of use, that trend upward could be, you had 5 more players that year.
And-
I mean, you have such minimal number of players to
Right,
begin
that's
with. So,
exactly right.
when you're talking little numbers, percentages jump hugely with very little change, so.
yes. But it's utilization of the activity,
What we have.
okay? If you've got, what's it called here? Dedicated space, okay? do you want to dedicate space to those kind of utilization numbers? It's not my call, that's the board's call.
I think we're talking about two different things. One is utilization of space. And he already said that if it were 100% crowded, which you're never ever going to get, and so most of your percentages are going to be very low. But you could take and have an increase, a dramatic increase in people. But if they all play at the same 2 hours of the day, your capacity use is still going to look bad.
Yeah.
But if they spread themselves out, then your capacity use would be larger, even though it's the same number of people. So you've got to look at the number of people. The capacity is a totally different category.
I don't know, I agree with that.
That's a little iffy.
Yeah, I would say capacity is the total amount you could possibly fit.
Right.
Regardless of when they play. So if you have the same number of players regardless of when they play, the capacity equals X.
Would be the same.
And so,
No, because if you have 30 people playing and they're all playing in 2 hours, there's only 2 hours of the 8 hour, say 8 hours available. But if you have the same 30 people went 4 people an hour, then you'd use up the whole day and you'd have 100% use.
No, because the capacity is 100, okay? If you put 30 people out there for, I don't care when you put them, your capacity, your utilization is 30 over 100.
Your confusion is your daily capacity or your hourly capacity? That's where the confusion comes in.
I think there's a lot of confusion when you talk about capacity and talk about usage. I think they're interrelated, but putting them together is going to be different.
But the way they have it calculated, say they have it calculated just random number, 1,000 possible throughout the whole day.
Yeah,
And you have 30 people in that 1 hour, you have 30 people all day. When you come down to it, you're still dividing that 1,000 by the 30 people that were utilizing it for that whole time, no matter when it was, the utilization was happening for that day. So the percentage would be identical.
Just
Is
a
what we're
reminder,
saying.
this data is all for the peak months.
I'm sorry.
This data that you have is for the peak months.
All
excluding
except,
summer.
yeah, that's
That
exactly.
helps clarify that it's a little more
Yeah,
focused.
exactly.
Because we wanted to eliminate any, you know, the summer is a loser. So, you know, that's true.
Does this include tournament play? When you did this, your utilization, does it include tournament time versus just normal usage?
All usage.
All usage, okay.
If we, now pickleball tended to have a problem there.
That's not actually true. That should have been the case. It was not true with lawn bowling, and there have been tournaments where that was not true for pickleball.
Okay.
So that's, if they don't go through and check in with the monitor, and when there's a pickleball tournament, they don't have to do that, Dan, do they? So that's data that is not captured. The same thing was true for lawn bowling until at some point lawn bowling said, oh, you mean we get to count those as well? And it was, well, yeah, that would be good if you did, so.
Okay.
So this data is to be taken with a grain of salt.
It's what was available.
At the time, yeah.
It was what was available.
Better than no data.
Right.
And if we have better data, that's why we said this should be run every year. As, for instance, golf is going to show up. Well, it did. We'll see it here.
okay.
Bowling as a whole is down 4.5%. But from 1990 to 2018, it's down 45%. But its utilization is 58 to 44, which is, it's still a game player. I mean, it's not, but that's what I'm saying. That's what the board, with that kind of information, then they're not going to axe a bowling alley, okay? But if you don't know, what are you going to do?
Right.
Okay,
And billiards too.
that was why we did this. Yes, ma'am.
So is there a difference between certain activities that allow you to come in as a non-resident and utilize that facility compared to other activities that you require or you need to be a visitor?
We have not gone that deep, no.
Because like bowling, anybody can show up at the bowling alley and bowl. They just pay a different amount. Same with golf.
Correct.
So those facilities are available to anybody at any
Right.
time. But
So-
tennis is not, or pickleball is not. You have to have a,
So that means that that utilization is good, whether it's from our people or someone else.
Members or non-members.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although, I mean, so this is just another thing about bowling. Bowling is in an air-conditioned building. They only count the hours that the bowling alley is actually open. So anybody else at that bell, their hours start at 5 a.m. in the morning. Bowling's hours don't start until they come in at 9 o'clock and open up the bowling alley.
Right.
And, you know, if you turn the heat up in there and march to 100 degrees in the afternoon, would you have different results? Yes, you definitely would. So, I mean, this is just, there's nothing that would stop them from opening bowling at 5 o'clock in the morning, the way that you can start to lawn bowl at 5 o'clock in the morning, you can play shuffleboard at 5 o'clock in the morning. You know, doing that in January when the sun doesn't even come up until 7:30 and it's 35 degrees outside?
Any measurement is going to have its...
It's going to have its fallback. This, again, what we did was try and create a system. If there's faults, come on down and pick it apart. I'm all in. Okay? If you have a way to change it to make it better, that's great. But this was our first shot of nothing. Okay? I mean, there was nothing out there.
And it's wonderful that you did all this, and I saw it was supposed to be, has it been continued? Have the numbers been continuously pulled in year after year in order to, I'm sorry, have these numbers been taken in annually since you started this so that we have a trend since then? Or did you guys do all this work and then nobody followed it up? That's my question.
Chris is going to...
We have reports.
We have reports that could be plugged into the data. Whether or not it's been plugged into these formulas, I can't tell you.
No, but there's Excel spreadsheet that's updated monthly.
It's still a, we saw it as a work in progress, and at the time, I'm trying not to say this nastily. The board was not real receptive to moving on. They accepted the analysis, and that's all they did. I don't know how to say that any other way. So it's on, if the board saw fit that they thought this was a reasonable way to go, but they didn't follow up, shame on them. Apparently they didn't figure that was worthwhile. So. Spas. I found it kind of interesting too. I was really surprised at how low the utilization was.
Particularly the Mountain View outdoor spa.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Particularly the Mountain View outdoor spa? There isn't
There isn't one. It was indoor and they closed it, didn't they?
Yeah, I think that meant to be indoor.
Yeah.
I was just kidding you, Gary.
Mountain View's indoor.
Mountain View was indoor. All right.
Yes.
But they're low.
So, in my limited understanding, when you go into a rec center and they say, hey, what are you doing? And you say, I'm gonna go get in the walking pool. And they say, okay, and then I'm assuming there's a widget that's moved over to somebody got in the walking pool. But if you got in the walking pool and then got in the pool and then got in the spa, and you didn't say, I'm gonna get in the walking pool, the spa, and the pool, how would you know?
That is the flaw in the data collection. Okay, that is the flaw. Now, if you had, when the security and what do I want to call it? Security and safety and security initiative eventually gets put into place, then wherever you go, okay, you will be counted.
How is that going to be accomplished?
Yeah.
You're going to all have a tag
Have like
area.
a
The number will be on the tag and you'll...
There's many
Because you can go to Fairway now, go in the back door and go to the physical
Well, you're not
fitness
supposed to
area.
be going in a back door.
I've got a fob, I can go.
But the same thing applies to,
You can go in the front door and take the stairway upstairs and not go to the desk.
That's absolutely
Or
correct.
the elevator.
That's, again, it's one of the flaws of our system right now. But our hope through the security and safety initiative was that eventually, after our computer system gets
You
up to
really want to
speed,
lock it down, okay?
then some sort of way to count people, okay? For instance, okay, and this is dreamland, okay? You could walk up to the door of your club
Just walk through.
and look at the door, and it'll read your eye and say, yes, you're a member of that club. Door open.
Yeah, optics.
And it counts you, and it knows you're in there.
Oh, please don't do that.
Yeah. Big brother got you.
Okay. Any other questions? Golf. This one just kind of flabbergasted me. See the trend from 2006 to 2018, down 22%. Not surprising. That's pretty close to, I think, where the rest of the world's at too. Golf is declining dramatically. They're trying to find all kinds of ways to interest young people to play golf. So, here's what our data looks like. Overall, our golf is up 33%. Okay?
Over 5 years, right?
For the 5-year
That's
period,
That's history.
14 to 19. The regulation courses are up 28%. And the executive courses are up 71%. Quail, down 22%. Yes, ma'am.
And this is for everybody that golfs, members and non-members.
Yes, that's the data
Well,
we
that would
have.
explain why that went down low.
I'm sorry,
No-
say it
No
again.
comment, no comment.
Where?
But you can see, back then, can you back it?
Yep.
You can see that some of the utilization is getting pretty low. Some of it's almost 50%, which I would say that's not bad. But when it gets down to 30-some and 26, the board might want to take a look at that, to see what the solution is.
Yeah, close Quail to the pickleball course.
Okay,
There's your pickleball lane.
But I think the point is that, are you better off trying to get as much data as you can to make decisions? Or should you just make decisions based on your wishes and whims and whatever strikes you the most?
All the data we can get will help.
Yeah. Tennis, now,
put it down. And you look at trend in tennis overall, and then you look at the utilization.
Mountain, 2%. Yeah.
I didn't even know you had to check in at Mountain View.
I'm sorry, say it
I
again.
didn't even know you had to check in at Mountain View. I just walked onto the court.
Nobody checks in there, so
I-
where are you getting numbers?
I can't do anything with that,
Right.
okay? If people want, something at Mountain View, sign the sheet.
Unlike Phil, you have to.
Okay.
Okay.
So the way you're using this data is to say, okay, if you've got a negative trend line, you're under capacity, then you're looking for opportunities to compress or consolidate
Right.
that activity so that the space, if it has a higher and better use, can be put to a higher and better use.
So, everybody.
Well, it depends on the structure of the check-in process.
Yes.
Most of you came up really low, but it could be higher.
Yes, it could.
Yeah.
That's not good enough.
What do they call that? Statistical error or
Yeah.
data error?
It calls numbers fudge.
We fudged nothing.
Not
What
far,
we-
just
what we used-
unavailable.
What
Yeah.
we used was what was available,
Yeah.
which was very, very funky.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how does your statistical information impact sports that traditionally see a full capacity in certain hours and no capacity at other hours? And tennis and pickleball are one of them. If you wanted to get on a tennis court Monday, Wednesday, or Friday from 7 in the morning to around noon, you can't find a court. But if you wanted to find a court at 7 o'clock on that night, because the courts are open till 9, there are crickets. So the utilization of the space is impacted at this time, but it's completely empty. And you find the same thing like in the pickleball courts. If you want to get on a pickleball court at 8 in the morning, you can't find one. But if you were willing to play at, say, 6 o'clock or right now, you know, there's plenty of space.
And what does that tell you?
But you still need the courts because the courts are being utilized.
Hold on. What does golf do? You go for a tee time.
They reseed? I don't know.
Well, maybe pickleball needs to look at signing people up other parts of the day.
So the biggest thing I think,
That's a good idea.
yeah, I think in the
And
evening,
they
it's
do
sort of
that
like
now.
pickleball and tennis in the evening, a lot of people have a hard time seeing, so they don't want to play.
So the problem was that until very recently, RCSC told the club that they were only allowed to do club events between 7 a.m. and 1 p.m. Monday through Friday. They weren't allowed to plan anything on the weekends, they weren't allowed to plan anything in the afternoons and the evenings, and for quite some time, the club had been saying, well, why? And the response kept being, well, you don't have dedicated space, and there's all these people that aren't members of the pickleball club that need to have access, and well, it turns out that that's not actually true. And as a result, finally, after many years, it was extended until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then it was extended until 5, and now we even have hours on Saturday, and it has had a remarkable impact on what's happening. Those courts have people on them all day long. I play in 3 afternoon groups, I play in an evening group, and whenever I'm there, there are other groups that are playing there as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I visited Mountain View for 3 months and did a survey of how many people were there at very different hours of the day. Their busiest time was between 9 and 11:30. You go there at 2, 3, or 4, and you could shoot a cannon through there and not hit anybody.
It's true. I got daily data because I go to that club 4 times a week, and I go to the pool. And I've got, sometimes there's a dozen cars. I went there at, on the 8th of May, 10:30 a.m., there was 7 cars. So it varies. Some days it's crowded. The day on the 3rd, there was 18 cars. So there's some fluctuation there, but generally by noon and later, there's nobody at Mountain View playing pickleball. I did see 2 cars there the other day.
Yeah.
I think we need to get back on topic.
Yep.
Okay, and now Chris is going to, so with all this was the prior history, and you know, and you can see that everyone can look at it through a different lens and a different filter. They can read the data differently. What RCSC has done is compile the best data they can for all activities as a result of this initial work. And what that helps the board do is to look at the actual usage to determine, hey, let's say somebody wants another billiard table, okay? And we see that there are 75 billiard tables open 7 hours a day. Well, we might not want to go for another billiard table, right? Because there's 75 available. It gives you some reference point as to the members that will benefit from your expenditures. Remember, this is your money. And so the board, as representatives of yours, has to look to how do we spend your money, our money as well, to best benefit all members.
So I've got handouts coming around. If we can just kind of go to the committee, run the table first, and then I'll pick them up and we can get them to the back at the end of, after those go around. I'm Chris Herring, Director of Operations. I see some familiar faces around the room. I see some people I don't know, so good to be here. I'm going to kind of let that go. What you have are 3 different handouts coming through. I think this may fill in some of the gaps of the questions that were coming up because there's a lot of that raw data that is coming around. The first is a look at what I would call the sports areas at Mountain View. John asked for some specific viewpoints with respect to Mountain View areas. You'll have that, and I've got some a second one for club activities or club rosters. That's just information. I'm not going to spend any time talking about that. That just gives you a 10-year history of club roster information as you're looking at it, the utilization. And then at the back side of this, and on the back side of your handout, is a 10-year historical look at monitored activity areas. And this is where some of those, I think, the gaps start to get filled in that the Long Range Planning Committee didn't have previously. So I had some previous discussions with the prior board director and the Long Range Planning and the methodology that they started to put together. And so when asked to put together utilization, that was the springboard that I went off of. So you'll see a similar analysis. But what I tried to do was to look at, okay, what's the total capacity that you have? How many people can fit through that tunnel when you're having the activity? But then to do it in a way that has assumptions, and then highlight, here's all the assumptions, and if we don't like the assumptions, change them, and see what happens to the data. So what I've got is just it's a snapshot of the current assumptions, and because we have data, I went ahead and included those months, May through October, because we have it. Let's look at it. Let's see how the numbers, how the utilization goes, rather than maybe us making the assumption, not that that's wrong, it just is, we have the data, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. So the very first one you have is Mountain View lawn bowling. So taking the availability hours, what are the center hours each month? Yes?
I want to ask you the same question. Do you wish to be interrupted as you're speaking or at the end?
While we're speaking is fine, because it may be relevant to what's on the screen.
Okay, and
So.
the second thing is, I don't think we have enough copies for everyone. I wasn't sure how many guests we were going to have, so will I be able to get?
Yeah, we can have some more available.
Okay, thank you.
So what we just said, that's the total hours that are available in a particular day. How many days of the month are there? But then to subtract from that some additional things, and this is where I think I feel I filled in the gaps from the long range planning, which is, okay, what are we going to do seasonally? So we look at it and say, to Director McAdams or Vice President McAdams' point, there is a cold time in the beginning, in the morning, from 5 until 8, that nobody's going to play an activity because either it's dark or it's too cold. So I factored that in to say, are we gonna reduce those hours because that later in the afternoon it's too hot during the summertime. So what you'll see here is seasonal hours that we lose because of the temperatures, either cold in the morning or hot in the afternoon in the summers. And you'll see these shoulder months where we don't have any adjustments because seasonally the temperatures aren't a concern for that time period. So we come up with total play hours in a particular day, then in a month. But then we say, what kind of maintenance do we have to do? Again, we're on a court, whether it be lawn bowling, where they come in and our staff do work there. And for this lawn bowling, is that happening pre-dawn so that it doesn't impact the available hours to the club? And so if that's a yes, then we're pre-dawn, and so that doesn't reduce it. If we did that during a time that precluded use of that area by the club or the users, then it would reduce the available hours for that particular time period. So we come up with a total amount of time that we have. If there's any seasonal maintenance, which we have in lawn bowling in May and June, we've got some aerification that happens in July, and that is July and August. I hit it all in July. Both of those are summer months. It was a little bit difficult for me to assign that out in a way that made sense. Turf recovery time. This is one where we say, how much time, if I play today, we can't play every hour of every day, so we need to leave time for the turf to recover, particularly maybe in the winter time when the grass is dormant and you can't play on it. So we don't want to say, hey, we have all this time available when we want to have time that it's not available. And we don't want to say, hey, we're underutilized by not accounting for that amount of recovery time. So we built that in, and so at the end of the day, also it's an outdoor activity. We're going to lose time to rain. So on average, we have about 24 hours or 24 days of rain a year. We're assuming in that process that that's a full day of rain, that we lose the entire day. It's not morning where we can play a different time. So again, those adjustments or those assumptions were made pretty conservatively to err on the side of providing for a higher utilization rather than dinging that activity for it. So coming down to total hours available in a month to play. And again, this is the first one that we've worked on, and then I applied this to some other activities we'll see as we go through. So how many greens do we have? How many rinks per green? What I think we were trying to do with long range planning was get to say what I would say, how many player positions do you have available to play? How many, if you have 4 people on each end of a rink, you have 8 rinks that you have available, you can fit so many people in this activity at a time. And so in this case, we've got one green, 8 rinks available. So we have so many game hours available of a player playing that activity. And then here's an assumption of that when that person plays, how long, or when that position plays, how long do they play? And this is an assumption that long range planning had. I extended that in. I have it as 2 hours here. Again, that's a variable that within the tool that this comes from. You just change it. And what happens is all of this then changes what the percentage is and how the utilization is calculated. So that comes up with how many game hours are available. Between game hours and supported players is how many players play per ring. In this case, I only have that set at 4 right now, and I know that's not a good number. We have more than 4 people, which is 2 people on either end of a rink that plays. We're probably closer to 4 on either side. Or what do we have?
It's usually 4, 2 on the side. We go to trips, but that's the second trip.
So this actually will be closer to what you have then with 4 people on a rink. So at the end of the day, during that month, what I'm trying to come up with is we can support 1,500 players in that area in that month. So what we didn't have before that we just recently we started in late 2021, 2022, we have full history from clubs that had their activity. So if it's a monitored activity, we get the check-in data. Lawn bowling, they self-report their numbers. So we have their numbers coming down here. I apologize when I put this together, I did not have December's, and that will minimally affect the total utilization. So at the end of the day, with that reported attendance at availability, 25% utilization in January. And then as you go out through each month, then the aggregate is just an aggregate total. This is more getting to kind of what the long range planning was looking at. Here's a 16.7%. This bottom one is a way to look at it and say, what if our data isn't quite right? That self-reporting data, maybe if that's wrong. What if it's really double what we had? What does that do to percentages? And it would go to 33% with that doubling. And the reason when I say that is the lawn bowling had a little bit different reporting between the different clubs. Bell reported a little bit differently than the others, and because it has to do with how they're doing their daily tournaments, open play and tournament play. So that number for Bell is a little bit different because the reported attendance is higher. So again, it was this tool set. It's just that, a tool set to try to look at this information, talk about what the assumptions are, what is the end result being, and if we don't like the assumptions, tweak them, and then you get a different result at the bottom.
So, Chris,
So-
this is though just for lawn bowling at Mountain View.
This is,
not for
yeah, this
all
is
of
not all, again, I'm very directed on what John asked for, which was to focus on Mountain View.
And this is also only club usage?
Well, lawn bowling
It's the only
is,
report
lawn
you-
bowling is only, it is only club.
But don't they have practice and don't people go and just utilize for practice outside of club hours?
You have to be a club member to get on the rinks.
Yes.
It's dedicated space as opposed to non-dedicated space.
Yeah, but I mean, but so you're reporting practice as well as you're reporting
Oh, anything,
game?
everything.
Yeah, and I don't know if if you look out here and there's 2 or 3 individuals practicing, I don't know, the club would have to tell us whether that is factored into here.
Why do you never have anything with players on utilization?
I'm going to get to players when I get to a couple pages back when I look at Mountain View's auditorium. You'll see that you'll see players kind of come into play there. So I just started first with sports and lawn bowling. So same thing with pickleball. Same type of assumption there, where we start to say, try to come up with what's the total max number of hours available, and then back from that, the things that would decrease the available hours to then say, okay, here's what we have, the number of players we can support, and then what's the attendance. So for pickleball, the assumptions are a little bit different. We have, we wash the courts, and there is a maintenance process for that on a monthly basis. And I have backed out tournament times on that if there is a tournament and it's played in a month, so that the club time is reduced by the tournament time, and I would then take the approach that tournament is 100% utilized, and so we're taking that away from the ongoing, monthly play, and so it will, by the total available hours are reduced, your utilization would then go up. You're not dinged for that tournament time. And so the same kind of methodology, you're going to lose time for rain. In this case, talking with Dan, we assign 3 hours for average amount of time that a player will play. And again, if it's 2, it's 2. We can change that and it will change the assumptions. Some people might play 4, some people might play 2, so 3 was kind of a middle of the road to get a feel for what that percentage looks like. So when you look at the total, what I like about this is it does give you a percentage, and you get to see summer months as that comes through the year. For Mountain View, the 45% at the end of the year. So again, this is full 2022 data, and what's interesting about that is it allows us to, we're a year out of COVID, because we know 2020, we took a big hit, everything was down in 2020. 2021, we started to come back, but it was still not there yet. So 2022 started to be the first really good year for data for us. Because this is check-in, and we have check-in data that we can look at, we can then start to look at how many cardholders are there. Distinct cardholders, not, not 12,000 here, but those 12,000 check-ins were 1,138 different individuals. And if we look at that, just trying to say how many people came more than once a month, how many came more than twice a month, you'll start to see that number here. How many of those were club members versus how many of those were non-club members? Again, just to try to get a feel for the distribution of cardholder use between cardholders and club members of that information. Yes?
So for lawn bowling, you had the extra line in there saying that if the numbers were double, this is what we come up with, but that, you don't have that for pickleball, is that correct?
I didn't, because I felt like, because our check-in numbers, and I do feel those check-in numbers are really fairly accurate. You're wincing, and I understand why. Some of that
There's a science sheet that doesn't get signed most of the time.
Yeah, well, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Baronet rather than that. Because the asterisk I have on this one is, it is self-reported sign-in check-in, so it may be underutilized, you're right.
But one of the things that I think as I went through all this, 45.3% is a pretty high utilization. When you look at the utilization of everything.
And it's 45%, even given the fact that it is probably, underreported. Because it's self-reported numbers. So. And again, I'm just kind of blowing through this. I don't want to get into the weeds a little bit on it, but I don't want to spend too much time buried there. Yeah. Same thing with tennis. Same assumptions. Took the tool set and just changed it. Tennis, the assumptions are very similar to pickleball. And again, you've got the caveat that these are self-reported numbers. So at the end of the day, the two courts at Mountain View, 12% utilized for the year. So to the players' utilization. So this next one is something we did. We have 29 different reservable spaces throughout RCSC. And this is the detail page for the auditorium at Mountain View for 2022. And what this looks at is every single reservation at the auditorium for Mountain View. And what the reservation was for. It includes setup and tear down time, both either side of it, because that is a necessary component for a reservation for that. And what you'll see here is players utilize. Well, let me back before I say that. We look at the total number of hours that are used for all of the different activities, 1,672. This available center hours are the hours that center is open and available. And so that may be 6 a.m. If you look at some other centers like Bell, it would be 5 a.m. And so you come up with a utilization or a total number of hours of 5,400 and a utilization overall of 31%. But in reality, these are group activities. How many individuals are getting up at 5 in the morning to go to do an activity, or 6 o'clock to go to an activity? It just doesn't happen. So this bottom line and the other larger spreadsheet you have uses this number, using an 8 o'clock start. That is a more reasonable time to have something start. Yes?
But you're going by dedicated space, and players doesn't have dedicated space.
No, these are reservations.
So we have to reserve it. So actually our utilization is 100%.
No, well, when you're in there, that auditorium is fully used by you. But you might be there 6 to 9 on a Wednesday evening, let's say. 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, there might not be anything else happening in that room. So what this is all the raw data right from our system where we make that reservation.
But I press the point again. We can only be in there for the hours we get permission to be in there.
That's correct.
We're not there from 6 in the morning till 9 at night. And we can't be. So if you're using utilization, if we can only be there the hours you let us be there, then we're utilizing our space 100% of the time.
Well, but it's not dedicated space, so it's not, and it's not your space in the sense that it's player space.
That's what I'm trying to make the point of.
Yeah, right, but what this does is this looks at the auditorium as a resource in total, and who uses that, and how much time is that used for, and so at the end of the day, it's used 36% of the available time. Between all uses, 36% of the available time, that auditorium is used. Now, players use that 68% of the, we have 1,600 hours of that make up that 36%. That 1,600 hours, players use it 68% of the time. So players is the highest user of the Mountain View auditorium. And of the used time, they use it 68% of the time. But at the end of the day, that resource is idle 64% of the time, 63% of the time, that resource is idle. And this is, again, straight from our system that we make our reservations in. Some additional verbiage, I won't go through each one, but if you want to look at it, some additional detail for that. But really, when you look at it as a theater type space, players and movies are really, if you're looking at a performing arts center of who might use that, those are the only two resources that currently use Mountain View's auditorium that would then transfer into a performing arts center.
If I was to look at that, then I could assume that we don't actually need an auditorium, but we need a theater. Just looking at the numbers and looking at percentage, I mean, I'm not making a judgment call, I'm just trying to understand that data would not support, we actually needed an auditorium, we actually need a theater.
Well, and that's likely true, and I think where that will hit home a little bit more is in the legal size document that gives this the roll-up kind of summary of all of this between all of our 29 different reservable spaces, is that you do have available space that is that flat floor type space, but what you don't have is that seating space.
Right.
And you could, you do movies here. We also do movies up at Marinette, a performing arts center. I'll get with you in just a second if you want to put your hand out. You might move all movies to there, not split it between two different centers, and you do everything there. That's just the movie mecca of where you go for that, and it helps. As many of those things that you can do will help the utilization, because the concern is you build a theater and you have idle time in there and trying to use as much as you can there. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, number 8 implies that no other club would be utilizing the renovated Mountain View space. But I'm representing the Tip Top Dancers, and every year we do a show at Sundial, and the seating and the arrangement there is not appropriate for our showcase. We're looking forward to hopefully performing in a performing arts center.
And it's interesting because we have sanctioned events at Sundial. When you look at our Sundial utilization, it's kind of mid-tier on that. But Sundial is very much of a contentious location because it is the only place that one has a stage and can accommodate 700 to 1,200 seats. And we have sanctioned events, concert band, women's chorus, different events for that utilize that cause challenges for our dance groups because we have that space. Now, something like Tip Tops, you want to do an event and the Performing Arts Center is only 400 seats. Well, what that might mean is you do two different shows. Right?
Two different shows is what.
And because the usage of a space like that is very narrowly focused, you would have time to do a Saturday and a Sunday show because you have less other contention for that. Although you're going to get to where the players are and they're doing practices or rehearsals in there, so there are going to be times when the stage is in use and it's not going to be as available. Sorry, go ahead.
But the other thing I wanted to make a point of, there are 11 performing arts clubs in Sun City. We had a meeting with all 11 of them, and 3 said that they wouldn't use Mountain View because of what you just said. But the other 7 said they would.
Yeah, and I think it could be a Field of Dreams moment when if you build it, they will come. In the sense when you look at an environment that has some tiered seating, a little bit nicer, a little bit more comfortable, a club may take that opportunity more to say, I can do 2 shows or I can do 3 shows. I can make a much better, much more enjoyable environment for that interaction.
One of the things that I think I've encouraged Bill, you to do, particularly, is build the program before you build the building.
Correct.
So get people excited about what is going to happen in the building, and then you'll get the support. But just a building does not make a community, in my mind. What happens is what goes in the building is what makes the community. Tom, you have a comment?
Yeah, hi, thanks. Yeah, that 2022, we were recovering from COVID as all entertainment venues did. So we did only 2 shows. We normally do 3. So you really, for projections, you need to increase that by 50% as we come back.
Fair enough.
Number 2, you have down the building goes 800. That's not possible. 450, 500 is tops.
Okay.
That it just won't be known. We pack them in for musical, it's 450.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that when I interacted with the previous board member doing this, I really felt like, you know, one of the things that needed to be considered in this was parking. And felt like parking was a variable that needed to be taken into consideration. Unfortunately, even though I have a math background, I couldn't figure out a way to really factor in parking, because you have a lot of things, how many people come in a car and how many spaces in and out. But what did became apparent was it's not reasonable to expect that the pool, at this center, let's say, the pool, the auditorium, and lawn bowling, all is 100% utilized all of the time. This is probably our smallest parking lot, although it meets the Maricopa County requirement. You just wouldn't be able to support it. So we have to, there's some back off of 100% that would be an acceptable number that would say we're extremely well utilized at whatever that number is, and I don't know what it is. I do know that 100% utilization of all activities isn't a feasible number to get to.
Is there any way you can get a number of, like with sports, you have people, average hours, blah, blah, blah. You don't seem to have that here, is that correct for the Mountain View Auditorium? My question is, we have 6,000 people, 6,000 hours of people coming in to see our shows every year.
Yeah, and your question is to Vice President McAdam comments when I presented this before, which is and I'm going to use some just examples. Your players with 400 people in a room for a performance is seen the same in these numbers as Dance for Fitness that may have 30 or 40 people using that same space. Right. So, you know, for me, I'm looking at it says that space is being used, not how many people are in that space.
Community impact is got that in this.
Yeah. But I think we will delve down into that data.
Okay.
Yeah, we will get that granular.
Thank you, Ted.
Not today, though.
Yeah. And one of the other things in looking at check-in data, you know, kind of going back to our monitored activity areas, when we look, you know, pickleball at Marinette in particular, or Bell tennis, what we see in the check-in numbers follows kind of the what we anecdotally know as well, and that is there's a preference of 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. that is the desired time to play. And what the request, the optimal request would be, and the analogy I use, is build me an 8-lane highway so that I don't have to wait during rush hour in the morning. So so build more so that we can play during our time. But what that means is the vacancy or idle time is actually even greater, because those 8 lanes on that freeway may not be used in the afternoon, and that's where we would be better to see that usage shift during the day for into the evening. In fact, you know, Scott is asking for some evening times here for water volleyball, and so, which is great, and I've offered that to Dan and say, hey, we've got some, you know, that would be the way to get there, to have some more time available for the club. So the next is what you have is this is our monitor activities at each of our centers all monitor activities, so it's more than just Mountain View, but I think it speaks to the request for where's all that specific data. So this is 10 years of data through 2022. Now what you're going to see as you go through here, you will see the end of 2021 when we started rechecking in clubs for monitored activities, and 2022 where that is a full year of it. You will see some areas like here is the mini golf club is having a check-in here. The tennis club is, again, this is by center at Bell, a small check-in for a partial year, you have a full check-in there. You'll see some where you maybe have some data here, and I think it's Aqua Fitness that will show up. Yeah, so like here's Aqua Fitness. We used to check in previously before we stopped and went to rosters. So you will see some Aqua Fitness check-ins. Then you will see the time period where we stopped doing that check-in. We were relying on roster numbers instead, and then you will see that the check-in data pick back up in 21 and 22. So there is some inconsistencies in there because of how we track data over time. But what you can start to extrapolate some trending out of this because you have annual numbers over a broad period of time. And that's not something I have thrown the numbers at previously. And so this last one really is kind of interesting. If you just want to know by activity summarized for every year, this is an aggregate of that activity across all centers. And you will see 2020 is a throwout year. That's COVID. You'll see we're 2021 we're starting to come back. 2022 we're getting close, but we're still below our peak 2015 to 2017, 2018 time periods. So that's the one handout that's together. The other is club roster information. Again, that's just historical, just some perspective over time what the club rosters are across the board. And then the legal page is the summary of all 29 of our spaces that we have that we make reservations for, how much time they're used, what's the available time, and breaking that down into a percentage. And again, on paper, whether it be for an activity like a sports activity or for a room, all hours. Okay, all hours are created equal. It's on paper. An 8 to 9 in the morning hour is seen exactly the same as an 8 to 9 in the evening hours. In reality, that's not how people prefer to do an activity. They have a preference. And part of it may be having individuals shift that preference, as well as maybe if we need additional resources for them. So I think that's the gist of it.
Can I just ask you, overall, for a reservable space, what is the range of utilization?
Well, you'll see it here. You'll see.
75% to 50%?
Well, overall, you're 31%. 31% across the board. Now,
the number in yellow on the second from the last page.
Okay, so 31% across the board.
Right.
So 69% is still available for utilization.
Yes, correct. Yeah. And again, that there are different. You have to look at Sundial and you'll see some breakouts between the different areas there. But if you go to Fairway, you will have a lot of the small meeting spaces. One of the takeaways from this is we have a lot of very small meeting spaces that are very underutilized. We don't need any more small meeting spaces. It's not just, so if you were to build Mountain View and you're like, we need to have a space to put 20 or 30 people, it's not something that's needed. Having a space for more people is needed.
Could you convert some of that unused small space to storage?
You could.
Would you?
What would you store?
Well, I have a club that has an issue for storage. We're paying for storage.
Knitters?
Yeah.
That's a potential for that space, because there are 2 or 3 meeting rooms at Fairway that are all very underutilized. Now the classroom, that's a different story. That gets used quite a bit. And it has some technology built into it for that, for particularly the Spanish club uses that area, that if you were to, do away with it, that would be a hardship for that particular club. Yes, Norm.
Chris, I just want to commend you for this. It's a tool and it's adjustable. And I wish we'd had it 20 years ago. And I think this is going to take us down the road to making decisions based on data, not on preferences. The percentage of use is going to change. Long-range planning, in looking at the new people coming in, a lot of them are going to be working full-time, part-time. We're not going to be able to close the clubs at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or shut down the sports facilities at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They're going to want things in the evening, and that's going to have to be provided to them. And so I think our utilization is going to go up based on that factor coming in along, because we're going to start using evening hours whether we like it or not. But I think this is a good base for making decisions. And it's certainly not perfect, and you admit to that. But it's a good base, and I think this is something this committee can use to good advantage.
And I would add that it's not a total red herring compared to what the long-range planning had done. It really is the long-range planning, the tool, and the resources, and the work that they had done, and just tweaked and added some more to it. So it's not like you're looking at what Gary had presented and what I have as totally two different views of the same world.
Yeah. It's all the same deal.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chris. This is
Thank you.
We should have this on long-range planning.
Okay, I don't really have anything else, but what I would suggest, 2 things. One is Jim and I visited the Rio Vista Center. And Jim, I don't know about you, but I came away from that visit with, this is wow. And I would encourage anybody, it's about 5 minutes away.
It's on Thunderbird, off of Thunderbird.
Off of Thunderbird. Yeah, and I would encourage you to go look at it, because you'll see what's possible.
2 stories.
2 stories.
2 stories.
The second thing I would ask is, to the extent that numbers aren't Sanskrit to you, give this some look over, write yourself some notes on it. We will deep dive into the Players Club next meeting and go through the utilization statistics for them. And from there on, I think, Jeff and Karen, we're going to start idea generation.
That will do the brainstorming.
Yep.
John, the last meeting you said you were going to do a review of visiting the theaters you visited.
Okay, yes, let's do that. So I'll speak to the Stardust, and anyone else that was there can also speak. I thought that was a very, very well-designed theater. It had a bunch of trade-offs. It was 9,000 or 10,000 square feet.
under 10,000.
Under 10,000 square feet. It sat 200 and some.
294.
294. Very comfortable seating. The stage was very nice. The lighting was, top notch. And what they had in the back was what they called a back 40. And the back 40 was an open space that could be cordoned off for dressing, for whatever needs they had. And then I thought another really neat feature they had is they had their set construction room
Right, the woods area, right.
right off the stage. So you're building your sets right next to the stage, and you need only put them that far away. They also had wonderful costume storage upstairs, a ladies and a men's. I'm trying to think what other attributes. The things I heard that they thought they missed were the size of the lobby was too small for them. They couldn't serve drinks in the facility because it was carpet, and they didn't want people spilling wine, beer, or water.
Doesn't the carpet have something to do with the sound?
The carpet is a...
So this just simply means you can't take a drink into the auditorium, nothing but water, that's all. But it is worthwhile mentioning that they have an outdoor area, so the lobby is nothing to write home about at all. It's small, they've got their box office there, it's not a place that people would gather. But immediately outside of the building, they have a very large patio area that's very nicely divvied up into little corners with outdoor furniture and coffee tables with the little gas fire possibilities in it. And they do, to try to make things an event and not just come to the theater and leave the theater, they'll do either hot chocolate and chocolate chip cookies or wine and cheese or something like that. So they do have that capability. It's actually very attractive. If anybody's interested, they did give us the sheet that has the breakdown of the 9,905 square feet with exactly how much the lot, so the auditorium is only 2,800, the main stage is 2,100, in the back 40, they actually list out each one of those with the square footage. So if you think this is a basically almost 10,000 square foot building, the auditorium itself is 2.8 thousand, so 22,800. Which means that 7,200 square feet of this is not auditorium space. So they have a lot of stuff that the public doesn't ever see. The public sees that 2,800 square feet where you sit. But it's actually, it's actually quite, it's pretty remarkable. If anybody wants a copy of this, I'm happy to, we've figured out how to copy back here. Happy to make you a copy.
John, real quickly, they do not have flies, and that was one of the major features of...
That's right, they do not fly off. Yeah, they do not.
The other thing, the theater is very nice, but it's smaller than what we want. But the rate of the theater is such that you're looking in the back of somebody's head. And I don't know if people that don't understand the rate of the theater is the greater the slope, the better the view.
Sure. So this is an issue. So if we move over to what we saw at Mesa Community College, that they actually call that the rake of a theater, whatever your head over head space is. The trade-off is following. The greater the rake, the better the seats are in the whole house. So you can have a seat in the last row, but if the rake is high enough, it's still a really good seat.
Because you're closer.
But what you can't do is have ramps going there. You have to have stairs. You just can't.
I'm sorry, but that's just not true based on the design of the current Mountain View Theater. It's raked the whole way well.
So this is what Bill Cook told me, that your theater people have sat down and talked about what the line of sight is from every single place. I'm just saying that your perception, I mean, this is, think about a sports field where you've got the really high rate. The high rate gives you a better experience, but the question is a trade-off. In a senior facility, do we want a high rate that gives you better line of sight so that even a small woman sitting behind a large man in the last row still has a really good view of the stage?
But we're not talking that much. There's a difference between here and here.
Well, it's...
it's degrees.
That's why I asked you what the slope was. That's what you need to put in there.
The slope, and so this is if we want to talk about going to the Mesa Theater, so Sun City West, just under 300 seats. When we went to the Mesa Community Colleges, we saw one that's 450 and the other that's 250. Okay, the 450 is for all musical performances, including musical theater. The 250 is for everything that's not musical theater. Okay, so they've got the larger one, we walked in at a level where the stage was off here and the seats were up here, and I looked at it and it just blew me away. So it was the 450 seats, basically what we're talking about building for Sun City, totally out of proportion to what would be suitable for us. I mean,
It's got the wow factor.
It's got the wow factor, but you know, we have a lot of performances where you're gonna have 100 or 150 people coming in. They
But you
would get
just-
absolutely lost in
Well,
that
you
theater.
just said that it was for musicals, okay?
This is a musical.
When you have a musical, you have to have a bigger room to absorb the sound. That's the reason that looks so huge, is because of that, you know, we don't want that.
And to pay
Yeah.
for it, to pay the
You know.
seats. My question is.
Yes, Tom.
Reviewing theaters, have you had a detailed review of this movie of the current architectural plans for Mountain View?
Oh, we have them in there.
So, I mean, have you all reviewed them? Because then you know if the line of sights are perfect and there's not one step inside the theater.
How many seats is that?
400.
400.
Okay.
What he's proposed.
Tom, you know, we can certainly have maybe somebody can give us a presentation on that.
Well, I would call the architects, and they'd be glad to more walk you through it.
Okay.
I would really recommend that because we've already, it's not reinvent the wheel. A lot of that's transportable. But this is a brilliant design that we put our hearts into.
Yeah.
And you need to look at these structured plans to know.
So we kind of started off here.
It's like in the eye of the.
We're started off here globally, and we're coming down into the weeds. And so now we're going to start getting into the details. We didn't think it was productive use of your time to start down here and then try to
No, I
climb
think you're
up.
reviewing theaters, review what we planned.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one of them.
Absolutely,
We'll
absolutely.
get to you.
Okay. Yes,
I
Anita?
have another question. Well, I got two questions. Chris was one. Do we charge the posse to use any of our facilities? Okay. I was in a meeting yesterday and with a group who is in Sun City but is not connected with RCSC. However, they serve Sun City population. They have a great need and desire to use the Performing Arts Center for a lecture series or whatever. They can't afford to pay the rental fee, but they're considering making a yearly donation. How would you handle something like that?
I think that you're kind of getting into scenarios.
Well, I know, and the lecture series would be related to Sun City.
Yeah.
It would be, I mean, it's not going to be, you know, how you send your kid to college. That's not going to happen.
What I would say is, you know, for the people that really, really, really want this Performing Arts Center, build the program.
Well, this is one program that could be built into this.
Yeah. That's what will get people excited.
Yeah. And they are very interested.
I don't. I'm sorry, but some things you can't build in advance. You don't have a facility to use. You don't have a way to do what you want to do. You can't do that in advance. I mean, you have to, yes, you can get excited about it. You can say, yes, as soon as that's available to me, I'll jump on it. But you can't go and just say, hey, you know, I'll pretend I have a theater, you know, so I'm just saying.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so I'm pretty new to this community, and I imagine in the theater club, sort of. I do go to all the little plays and things. I think our theater is an embarrassment to our community.
Oh, it is.
So whether we want to, like, I don't know, but I'm
What are the
listening to all the
alternatives?
conversations, and I'm thinking, to me, without doubt, we need to build theaters.
Yeah, what are all
So whether you get excitement in the community, how you generate that, I don't know.
That's why you're here.
I think if you build a theater, people will start coming to things more, and we'll want to have more things there, because it'll be a wonderful place to come.
Okay, and you can,
Yes, I know, but I'm just saying,
John, what is it you always say, that's a conclusion?
Yeah.
We're not at the conclusion stage.
I can't argue with your conclusion.
Right.
I can go through the data.
so I'm getting it.
Yeah. So, anyway, I would encourage you to check out Rio Vista. It does not have a theater. For those of you that were able to attend the theater previews, I think that was a very good experience for all of us. Next meeting, we are going to start a deep dive into our utilization of the theater.
I just wanted to respond to Anita.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I think you should.
Yeah. Anita? So I just wanted to respond to you as well and for the group to hear. There are other groups, Show in particular, the health fairs that they run that benefit Sun City, that they pay rental fees for the space that they use. So even just because it's benefiting the community doesn't mean that they don't pay.
You were at that meeting. Can I reveal who it is?
I guess.
The library.
Friends of the library.
Yeah, the Friends of the Library. They're between a rock and a hard place. They help support the library, but they serve Sun City, probably 90%. They're located at our centers, and they don't make enough money to pay the room reservation fee to do these things. But they do have a bookstore that does have income. And they would be willing, no, I'm not going to say how much because I have no idea, but they would be willing to possibly make a donation to cover a series. You're like, we'll give you, I don't know, sounds crazy, we'll give you $10,000 to do 6 lecture series. That is something they're really interested in.
Good.
And they can't do it in their library because it's not big enough. But they can't charge attendance, that's part of the library policy. So they can't make up the money that way. And they can't, it would be almost impossible to not let in a non-Sun City resident because it's published through the county.
Yes. Let's put that in the parking lot. All right. Thank you very much for coming.
Wait.
Gene?
Sorry, John. First of all, did everybody sign up on one of the sign-in sheets?
You have to turn it over.
Committee members, I established an email. Some of you have responded. I sent you all an email to see if,
Sorry, we're getting the evil eye from Mommy.
Looking at you.
to see if you received it. And then I have sent you another message, and I do need to know if the information that I was given is correct. I have one correction on it already. And then I also asked if you do have an alternate to please let me know so that I can.
And we can
add it.
just email you a correction.
Yep, you can email me anything.
Well, not necessarily.
Oh, that's okay. Is it everything turned off already?
Yeah.
Oh, all right, well, I hope you're all familiar enough with our RCSC website. You know that if you go into it and you go over to the right, there's a column that's RCSC. And you go down, you'll come to a place where it says RCSC again, I believe, committees and summaries. They have added our committee, SAC. Our plan is hopefully to use that as a depository for all the articles and items that we're presenting. So that if you came today and weren't able to get the copy of the report, you can go in there. I just have to make sure that we can do that. But right now, the press releases are there, and I believe that's where videos will probably be on the YouTube channel. And John, what exactly next week? It says architect visit?
No, we're not going to have the architect's visit. We had another architect. What we wanted to do a deep dive into the Players Club statistics for 2022, by person, by hour, by the whole the whole shebang, so everyone can see that, and then we can discuss it.
John, can I ask you, on June 9th, you say you want to bring in the group wish list presentations from groups. You're inviting in groups? Are you inviting in clubs to give their wish list?
Yeah, I mean, the goal, and loosely defined, because we don't really know how to do it, is how do we get the clubs to say, this is what I want at Mountain View? And maybe someone will say nothing, but if somebody has an interest out there and we don't know about it, we can't include it in the alternative. So however we get that data.
So are we sending out an email to people we think would be interested? How are we inviting them here?
Let me ask you, should we send out an email to the COC to club presidents?
John, is this for any club at Mountain View, like volleyball, aqua fitness?
Yeah.
Or just a club that wants to use the theater?
Yeah, or a club that wants to use the theater.
So anything that currently uses Mountain View?
No, any club
in
Sun City. That's what I'm saying, any club in Sun City.
Yeah.
You're gonna open it up to that can of worms right now.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I mean, we shall see.
I don't know if you wanna mix soup and
Nuts. Peanuts, bananas, and everything else.
John, Joanne would have email addresses for the club presidents
Okay.
in the club's office.
It's on RCSC.com.
Oh, that's not necessarily today.
Okay. We'll try. Let's see. I mean, a lot of times you think you're going to get a lot, but don't.
Sue.
This is a copyrighted production of the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated and is intended for the sole purpose of informing our Recreation Center members. Any duplication, copying, transmission, broadcast, or use, including electronic and social media, is strictly prohibited without the prior written consent from the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated. Thank you for watching.